Hello, hello. Welcome to day 3 of Pleasure Driven Prosperity. I'm about to let everyone in. We are going to be starting our coaching call because today is our live coaching day. So today we're going to be diving in with whatever is alive for you today, right now, what it is that you're feeling challenged with, struggling with, and we'll go from there. I also have something that has been submitted beforehand that I will be diving into as well from somebody else who couldn't be here live. But first, welcome, Alison. How are you, my love?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, great. Great. I've had a lovely morning and I'm just so happy to be here. This is like one of my favorite things to do. Sit down. I've made myself a really yummy coffee. I put butter in my coffee and maple syrup. So it's very decadent. So I get to have a coffee. I get to see you lovely people. I get to do some coaching. It's amazing. It's my favorite. So, all right, we're going to dive straight in because I know, Alison, you've got things to do. And as people jump in, I will let them in and we'll go from there. So, Alison, my love, I know you started to talk of something yesterday that you want to explore. You're welcome to bring that into the space or anything else that feels alive for you today. What are we coaching on today?
Yeah, let's talk about what I mentioned in on Instagram. Was like so. I just to give you an overview of the things that I do. I'm postpartum doula and a women's circle facilitator, and I help mums as well. But I've got like offerings that are both online and in person. And my in person ones are like in home fourth trimester support, as well as women's circles and mother's blessings. And then I've got like online birth debriefing, postpartum planning, and motherhood and matrescent support. And when you were talking yesterday about focusing on one thing, I was, for me, it makes sense why like I do all these things. I feel like they're all very interconnected and all in the same sort of life phase, the same people. But yeah, I guess I'm just wondering like um should I like because I'm thinking about like when to like when I'm launching something or when I'm like trying to sell something. So at the moment I've just opened my books for postpartum support for next year.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, like, should I be just talking all about postpartum support all the time and sort of like put the other things to the side? Or like, what I kind of do is just like, um, share all of the things about all of the time. And so I just always, unless like, yeah. And then I just on my stories will put like circles tickets for sale and this is open and blah blah that sort of thing in my stories. Anyway, yeah, what should I like? Is it okay to be across all of those things, and is it confusing or how to focus in on that one thing like you were sort of talking about?
Yes, thank you for giving me the chance to clarify. I'm just going to grab my pen. Okay, so what I was speaking to about like focusing on the one thing, and I was talking about like being contained within your own lane. You've got your lane ropes, you know where you're headed, that's your direction. So, what I meant by that is exactly sort of as you spoke to, like focusing on like one thing at a time, which I think you shared in Instagram, in our DMs. And so what that would look like is because I'm the same as well, right? Like I share mostly one-on-one mentoring, but I also am offering programs like this for experience. I've also recently just finished up like Mama on Fire, like my group program. And so what I mean by that is having the one focus in the sense of knowing what my work is, knowing what I'm here to share. And it sounds like you've got this beautiful collection of exactly what it is that you're here to share. And it sounds like you're really, it sounds like energetically sound. Do you know what I mean? And so what I meant by that is not wavering to, maybe you would have someone who would be like, oh, like I love your postpartum support. It'd be really cool if you did like meditations as well. And then all of a sudden you start like, oh, I'm going to learn how to help people meditate, or I'm going to start recording meditations. Like if that's not your thing, right? And that's not to say we can't explore and be curious and experiment. But what I'm trying to say here, which it is kind of convoluted, it's really about like having that one focus, right? And as I said, like it sounds like this is really robust for you already. So I wouldn't worry too much. And having that one focus would be like, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be promoting my program that's launching. You know, we've got like launch phases. So, like, as I spoke to yesterday, I think it was, I've had this 3-week launch phase to promote this free experience and really talk about, you'll probably have seen in my content, I'm talking about prosperity. I'm talking about how we can create pleasure-driven prosperity. I'm talking about that. There are other things that is my work, you know, obviously experiencing pleasure in motherhood and blending business and motherhood. And I can still talk to them, but not right now. Right now, I'm focusing, my one focus is on calling all the people who want to learn about this into that experience. And so it was 3 weeks. That was my focus. You know, I've got coming up in a couple of weeks' time, like this really big project that I'm excited to share with the world. And I felt myself being like, oh, I really want to start talking about this. And it's not to say it's like right or wrong. I don't ever want anything to seem like black or white. You know, you could always like tease things out as well, like give a little teaser of what might be coming amongst, you know, the launching of something. But there's a difference in the energy. Does that make sense? It feels like there is a focus, like I'm laser focused in a launch of like what I'm launching, and the content I'm sharing is all revolving around that. And so I don't feel then that I am depleting myself from like, oh, I'm going to talk about my book, and I'm going to talk about like, you know, I've got a bunch of free stuff I can be offering people, but I'm not going to share it all at the same time. So the way I do it, that might be really helpful for you as well. If not, like take it or leave it. The way I structure how I share things and what my focus is I look at things like mostly in month blocks. I only plan 3 months in advance because I don't like planning any further. I've done it before and I'm like, I get to a few months in and I'm like, that desire isn't like effervescent and alive for me right now. So I'll usually plan 3 months in advance, and each month I'll have my focus. And so really this month has been pleasure-driven prosperity. Next month will be my next kind of project. Yeah. And that's not to say that, you know, if someone wants to ask me about my book or something in this month when I'm talking about pleasure prosperity, that I'm like, oh, you have to wait until next month. Like, of course, I'm still having those conversations. So maybe for you, that would look like, and it might not be a whole month. Maybe are you running your circles like monthly? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do them like, as in when you're launching each month, are you launching each month to get bums on cushions each month, or do you like sell them as like a package of like 3 circles or 3 months or anything like that?
I usually have 3 dates and I just talk about them for so they're monthly, and I'll have the 3 dates booked in for the next 3 months, and then I'll just keep talking about them over and over again for that whole time.
Yeah, what I mean is, does somebody buy a ticket for all 3? Like, do they buy
Oh,
that?
no,
Okay,
they
so
can, but they're separate. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And so so you've got that you're promoting. So maybe it would look like, you know, focusing on like 1 week is all about talking about, hey, I've released the dates for the circle for this month or next month. Like working out when's the best sort of time frame for you. And that's, again, not to say that you can't talk about it during the month, but I would just like have a really simple strategy in your focus, like what it is that you're focusing on. So, you know, okay, like this week, I'm really going to talk about circles, and I'm going to talk about like what's beneficial about circles and what themes are coming up in circles at the moment. And what does it look like to experience, you know, being in circle with me. So you can really get like deep into it and then go wide as well. Like, so you could do that and really promote that for the month, for the week. And then maybe there'll be like a day here or there during the month that you talk to it as well. And then the following month might be like, oh, okay, I would really love to sell out my postpartum sessions, right? Or my postpartum packages. Like maybe you offer yourself like a good 2 or 3 weeks to begin to talk about, say, 3 months worth, like the first 3 months of next year, or wherever you're at in that time frame where you have spaciousness. Because then that means when you can get deep into a topic, that's when people are like, oh, like she's the one I'm going to see when I have a baby. I want her for my 4th, you know, trimester, because you've been able to talk so beautifully to it. You've been able to like get deep and like you've had that focus. Does that make sense? And does that
Yes,
feel, yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. Does that feel more soothing for your nervous system? Like, how have you structured it? What's your strategy at the moment in terms of what you talk about and when?
I don't really have a strategy.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's pretty much just like driven by what I'm thinking about and
Yeah.
what's coming up for me. Like I do like usually like do a whole bunch of like writing for like I might write like 2 weeks worth of posts in a stint, but they'll be usually I try and just go, oh, okay, well, I've just talked about that. I'll talk about this, talk about that, I'll talk about this. But I was kind of thinking like last week or the week before, it was like the perimental health week or whatever it was. And each day that I post 3 days a week, I wrote just about that. And it kind of felt a bit more soothing on my nervous system because I was talking about the same topic each time. And it also felt like I could be a bit more nuanced in what I was talking about because I feel like sometimes I just write one post and then I'm like, but there's so much more to add
Yeah.
to that, you know?
Yeah, and I see it as like, I'm going to use like my hose analogy. You know, there is this idea that like, oh, like once I talk about what I already know, like, oh, I'm going to run out of content. Like it's like as if there is like only a bucket or a puddle of water that we can utilize. And it's actually not the case. It's like we're actually like a hose, I call it. And like I feel like the first part of content when you're talking about something, it's like the gross, like hot water that you get when you remember when you were a kid. I don't know if this was you as well, but like you drink the hot, gross water out of the hose, it's not so great. And like when you let the water keep flowing, like, oh, that tastes better. That's a little bit nicer. My analogies really. Yeah. And so when we start to see that actually we're a vehicle for creativity and we are able to really, like, you are so grounded in what you know and what you can share in your experiences that you actually would have endless content. And so the good stuff is like deeper down, right? We're like the kind of surface level stuff is on the surface. Like we've got to get through that stuff first before we can get deep down, right? And that's why you notice that the more people are in their work or in their certain profession or doing what it is that they're doing, you'll notice that their like authority or their like leadership in that topic increases as they go because they're getting deeper into the work, you know, and they're able to then explain it in more simple terms to other people, you know, and we get to that by diving deep, you know. So, and as I said, like whatever feels like soothing for you, I would like dive into. And this can be an opportunity to explore and experiment, do some trial and erroring. I don't think that's a word, but anyway. And yeah, see like what works for you. Maybe you realize that, oh gosh, I get like 90% of my signups for circles the first kind of when I first start talking about them. So actually, if they're going to be at the end of the month, I'm going to put it at the start of the month and get most of my signups then. And then I kind of have a bit of a buffer zone to know like how much more I need to talk about it, depending on how many spaces are left. And yeah, as I said, maybe you're getting into a period where you're realizing like, oh, I've got some capacity for some fourth trimester, like in-person work. I'm going to really dive into that. I'm going to spend all month talking about that. Do you know what I mean? And so the more we do this, the more we experience it, the more we get curious about how we can offer our things and like have those like simple strategies and this focus, the more we can start to see what works and what doesn't. Does that make sense? You might even find that like, oh, wow, if I could actually talk about circles for a whole month and sell a package of 3, like that would actually be ideal for me because say I've got the next 3 months of circles filled up or at 90% capacity just from speaking about it for the first month, like I'm good for the next 2 months. Then that 2 months, I can really focus on my postpartum offerings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that feels great because I feel like this past year, I just felt like I was just like, sell, need to fill the tickets, need it. Like, I just felt like I was constantly thinking about like, oh, in 2 weeks' time, I've got my next circle, got to talk about it lots. And it feels a bit, yeah, like behind or something. It just feels a little bit rushed. So yeah, I like that idea of giving myself a bit more space and then being able to film a lot of the tickets or something, and then just,
Mm-hmm.
talk about those last few, like what the last minute tickets that are available and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think too, what you were speaking about there, that energy, I call it like the frantic feminine, where we're like, oh, I've got to like do this and do that. It feels like you're flapping about. And this is why I started to speak to you yesterday, like the difference between the feminine and the masculine, and how when the feminine is contained, like we have this beautiful container that we can be the creative, emotional, expressive versions of ourselves because we have that safety. And in looking at a focus or like a structure, and that creates that masculine structure for us to have that sense of safety. You know, it's not like we're wide open, like, oh, I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about for the next ever onwards. Does that feel true?
Yeah, that feels great. I loved that analogy yesterday about like the banks of the river.
Yeah.
Like that, then I was just thinking of that then, and just like I feel like now it was fine to do that last year and this year, and it worked really well for me because I was still experimenting and learning about my business. But I feel like now I'm ready for those wider, more solid banks for my flow.
Yeah, I love that. And like, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think there's such value in when we are starting to blossom our business and we are like kind of just really just having a really good time. Like, I don't want to say throwing spaghetti at the walls because that sounds a bit gross. Like, let's just like throwing glitter and fucking paint and whatever at the walls and seeing like what is beautiful and what we like, you know? And I think there's such value in that. When I first started, I was offering like online programs left, right, and center. And it was a new one every time. And I allowed myself the permission to be like, oh, I desire to speak to this. I'm going to create a program for this, you know. And then there's other people who recommend like, no, you do your first program. That's your signature program. Then you rinse, repeat. And, you know, yeah, sure. I think that definitely has some value as well. But for me, I'm really glad that I allowed myself the permission to explore and experiment. And now I feel like after, you know, a good 3 years or so, I'm like, I have my signature pieces, you know, and we get there by doing all the painting, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
it's my pleasure. Is there anything else that you wanted to coach on today?
I'm just trying to think I think that was the main thing. I was just because I hear a lot about like that, like focus on one thing and blah blah blah. But I feel like yeah, like that kind of makes more sense in just like focus on the things at a time, you know, like that kind of resonates more with me because yeah, I feel like when you hear those business ideas and you know shoulds, then it feels like, oh, okay, I should be doing it like that, or maybe I should just be focusing on one thing. But it feels good for me doing all the things that I do. I just need to share it in a more structured way, I think.
Yeah, and whatever feels good for you, and this is
Mm.
part of like we often don't know what feels good for us unless we work out what doesn't, you know. Um, like I know of other people who as well who will talk to, you know, having a 3-month launch for like say an online program. And for me, I'm like, oh God, like that would really drain my energy. Um, Giving myself like that really big container. So for me, like usually like a month tops is what I will launch for, like, and really kind of be selling something at one time. So yeah, you might find like you could try weeks or fortnights and see how that works. It's like the period. Um, yeah, or you might find months like, and it's just depending on like what feels soothing for your nervous system and what is working for you and what's kind of like logical as well. Like, oh, that makes sense. You know, for me, it makes sense that each month I've got something that I'm offering. Sometimes it's a free thing. Sometimes I'm just speaking of my book. Yeah. And then I've got like maybe a brand building activity that month, which might be like, oh, I'm going to shout out to 5 podcasts and ask if they want to do a guest interview with me or something, you know? And that's my month, you know, that feels really simple and aligned for me, you know, it gives me enough kind of spaciousness to dive deep into something and to speak, like do a really good job of like speaking to something and trying to, you know, inviting people into things. But it also isn't too long that I, you know, start to feel depleted from a huge launch, you know? Yeah. Now you were talking
Thank you.
yesterday too about you know, inconsistency. And I've had a couple of people who have messaged me and said a similar kind of thing. So did you want to explore that? And I can also add in some things that people have been speaking to me about as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything that you think of right away that you're like, why is this a problem for you? Or how does this problem present itself?
I think like I'm okay. I'm in myself in that I'm not always consistent. I'm okay with that. Like I know that I'm a cyclical being who like and I really am across my cycle and know when I'm more creative and I'm happy to do my writing and stuff in those periods. So I feel like that um feels okay in its inconsistency. But what I find tricky is like that, like say with the monthly circles, like if like in the middle of this year, like I had them like really busy and big and like full, and then the last 3 months were not like that at all, and I had to cancel two and just have one. And I think that inconsistency is trickier. And I know that you talked to that yesterday about like the stacking, which I really like resonated with, like but also that's okay when you're doing like 5K and 15K, but when you're doing like, you know, only much smaller amounts, and also that's my entry, uh the circles are like my entry into my work, like people's entry into my work, so like that's my lowest cost
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like that needs to be the most consistent because that's going to feed into all of my higher paying offerings. So that's kind of where the inconsistency is hard because I kind of need it to be like to feed into all the other things.
Mhm. If you think about your postpartum clients that you have had, have any of them come from places other than your circles?
Well, yes. One I just met at a physio appointment. We were sharing a physio appointment, like a physio Pilates. So I met her there, and yeah, and there's been word of mouth, like a little bit of word of mouth, but I don't want to say like I'm a word of mouth person yet. I need to work really hard on word of mouth still, but I'm early days with that.
Yeah, okay. And the reason why I asked that question is because we're really good at telling ourselves like it can only happen this way. And if it doesn't happen this way, well, then I'm screwed, And then, like, it's not even so much the inconsistency that's the problem. It's like what we make it mean about ourselves and like what's happening in the future. And I mean, realistically, which I actually don't really like using that word very often, but like, if we're honest, it's as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we don't have control over the people, whether they're buying into our circles or not, whether they're buying into our programs or not, right? What we do have control over is our effort that we put in, and also like thinking about what it all means. Like, what are we making it mean? So if I am like this experience here, my free week-long live experience, pleasure-driven prosperity. I'm like, this is going to be such a great, cool offering. I desire to offer it, so I'm going to be sharing it. And then I get to have got 2 separate offers for one-on-one work with me. Like, how cool that I could potentially fill those places before the end of the year. Like, great, awesome. And also, like, whilst I'm having conversations with people who are interested, if I finish this week and I haven't had anyone sign up for any of those spots, I can either choose to be like, oh no, like, oh, I'm back to where I started, or like, oh, I thought I had momentum, but I clearly don't. Or I'm trying to think, because there will be some of these thoughts that will probably pop into my head, and that's okay. It's like from then what we're thinking about that is then actually going to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if I'm like, oh, I've had my fluke, it's done, I've had my good few months, that doesn't then invite me into like being open to sharing my content that I want to share, or like actually reaching out to people and be like, hey, did you have fun? Like, did you enjoy this week together? Yeah. And so what I want to get at here is we don't have that control of who's coming, and it does take time for it to get to an experience of like, oh, this is a regular thing that people come to or people pay for. But I would just invite you to consider, like, number one, like, consider what you're making it mean about yourself and your business. Number two, I would invite you to consider like, oh, well, I'm putting a lot of pressure on these circles because I'm believing that I can't get other clients just if I don't fill up my circles. you know. It might even be helpful to be like, oh, okay, as I said, like consider where have other clients come in from? Because all you need to do, this is like the most basic part of it when it comes to selling. It's like all you need to do is meet people, share what you have to offer, and let them know you can help them. Obviously in integrity, if you actually can. If it's outside your scope, we don't recommend that, right? And so you've made a beautiful example of that yourself, like being at the physio, right? And so, yeah, your circles are absolutely a great opportunity for that. It's an opportunity to like make a little bit of money and to start to build that community. But that's not to say that the people who joined your circle 6 months ago aren't going to be hiring you next year either. You know what I mean? It's just we have these ideas in our mind of how things play out. We have a certain manual like for what we believe is meant to happen. And when things don't, like if things aren't aligned in that manual, we think like, oh, well, now I'm screwed. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on my husband's computer and it keeps on flicking away and I can't find you. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's hard when you like that balance, right, between like wanting to have control and like and plan, and then also like letting go and like being okay with like, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
and you might find like we just talked to earlier, you might find like, oh, it would actually be really much more soothing to my nervous system to actually spend a big chunk of time and offer like a 3-month block, you know. And then occasionally if there's some space and I've got the energy, I can say, hey, I've got a one-off one spot, you know. Maybe it's looking at the way you are structuring it, you know, because I know for myself, I started out doing women's circles. This was back in Melbourne and I loved it. And I remember my first one, this is a funny story. I'll be quick because I know you've only got a little bit of time. The first one I did, 12 people sold out, done in like a week. And I was like, got this, easy, too good, you know. And I think it was probably my third. I maybe had 3 people there and I was like, what's going on? Yeah. And so for me, like I shared that I decided not to run circles anymore. I had a 2-year-old, I had a newborn. I needed a good 24 hours to kind of like, come down from having to hold all that. And then for me to like be constantly like calling people in each month, I didn't have the capacity then. So maybe it's looking at like, what do you have the capacity for? And how can we really do that in a way that is going to create the results you want and have it feel good for you as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's really great. I'm going to have to jump off now.
Yeah, go
Thanks
for
so
it.
much, Rika.
Good. My pleasure. I'll see you later. And I'm going to speak to Erin's question. Let me pull it up. Okay. So Erin's question was, what's challenging me is having the confidence to promote myself and what I do, to trust that it can add value to the world. At the moment, I'm working on an inner child healing ebook. Very cool. I added that part. And I just finished the draft. Congratulations. That's awesome. But I have this block when I finish something. I kind of feel deflated and start to question, is this actually any good, or would people be interested in it? It's why I lose momentum. Like I stopped Storybones, which is Erin's blog, before. And then when I picked it up again, I was like, hey, actually my writing is really good and of value, but I've just had a drop in my confidence and abilities lately. Like, what else can I offer that is of interest to people, and how can I get it out into the world? Yeah, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because this really resonates. It takes me back, right? And yeah, side note, Erin, your writing is beautiful. So I'm glad you're, relaunching Storybones. All right. So what I'm pulling out of here, and this one's going to be really great if you're listening and you're not Erin, like this is probably going to be something that majority of people can resonate with and experience. So stay tuned for what I have to share. And the first thing I want to share is like, I want to go meta. Like we spoke recently, I think it might have been on day 1, about how like you go first, right? How like we had this idea that, oh, when I get to there, then I'll feel confident, or then I'll feel at peace, or then I'll feel successful. And then we get there And unless we've done the work to actually feel more confident or feel more at peace or feel more successful, when we get there, we're still the same person, right? And it's like, yeah, it might feel good for a moment, and it might be like a quick boost to your confidence or to this idea that you feel successful or you feel at peace, but it's actually like backwards. So what I mean by that is, like, we go first, like we do the work that builds the confidence. The confidence doesn't just miraculously and magically appear when you've completed an ebook, right? Which you've come to know, like, okay, you've written and completed your draft of your ebook, which is amazing. Congratulations. And now it's like, oh, feeling like it feels like, oh, are you starting to question yourself? Like, is this any good? And so you're thinking, okay, well, if I had the confidence, then I would be able to put it into the world. But you see, the thing is, the confidence comes from putting it out into the world, from moving through that process. And this is what I mean about, like, let's get meta for a second. So I have, there is a belief that I have that our desires are like a dangling carrot, right? Like the little stick with the dangling carrot. It's like the horse is going for it. Anyway, you know what I mean? Our desires is the dangling carrot. And so in this instance, writing, editing, publishing your ebook and having it sell to be in the hands of the people who need it, that's your desire, I'm assuming, right? Like, let's use that as an example. That's your desire. So that's the dangling carrot. The thing is, we will think that, okay, the purpose of this desire is to get it out into the world and sell it to the people and have the people who need it have it in their hands, right? However, that's the carrot. That's the desire. The desire is to lead us on the path of our purpose. So I'll say that again. The desire is the dangling carrot for you to walk the path of your purpose, right? And oftentimes we've got no idea what that path is, what the purpose of the path is, what the purpose of the desire, the carrot is. We'll make it up in our mind. Like I said, it might be like, oh, well, the purpose of this desire is to sell this ebook and have it in the hands of, the people who need it. That's what we can assume the purpose of this desire is. However, I've come to learn that it's actually the desire is the carrot, and the path, it's like what you experience and grow through and move through. That is the purpose of the desire. I'll give you an example of my life. So after I had my first babe, ended up with postnatal depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Not a fun time, right? I like to share this story because it gives you a good idea of like where I was at. And then not long after I had my second babe, right? So I've got a newborn, I've got a 2-year-old. I've only just recovered from that perinatal mood disorders, like maybe a year or two ago, just before I fell pregnant. So yeah, it would have been probably a year before that. And all of a sudden I get this like undeniable urge and desire to launch my business. Right. And at the time, I didn't even really know what it looked like. As I shared earlier, like I started running women's circles. I started doing one-on-one work with like incorporating yoga and breath work and my exercise physiology knowledge and experience, and my coaching, because I used to be a health and wellness coach as well. Right. And so that's kind of what it looked like to start with. And it was August of this year. And if you've watched any of my lives, I haven't done that many, actually. It's probably even my last live on Instagram. I got to a point where I felt like I was almost like hostage to my business, in the sense of like, I had to keep going until it became successful, because that was the whole point of this, right? That's what I thought. Like, the whole purpose of my desire to start a business was to get it to be a successful business. And so I was like, okay, right, well, I'm just like kind of forcing myself to complete this process because, it's part of my identity that I complete things, I finish things. But what if I gave myself the permission to quit right now? Like, it's my business, it's my life. I can make these choices. No one is making me do this. I'm doing it to myself. And I gave myself the permission. And this is where we spoke earlier, maybe on day one, about choosing your choice. Like, I actually gave myself the permission to choose my business or not. And I got so emotional, and I was like, no, I don't want to leave my business. I'm so in belief that this is where I'm meant to be, and this is the work I'm meant to be doing, and this is going to pay off. And then I started to question, like, well, actually, this business is already successful, right? Like, in probably society's views, yeah, it's not $1 million business, or like it's not that kind of, capitalistic successful right now. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, what has this business created for me? And I think this is why I got so emotional, because I thought, oh my gosh, it gave me a vehicle for creative expression, self-expression, meeting other women, helping other people, having conversations with other adults that weren't surface level conversations. Like, even just those things alone were absolutely pivotal. I said this yesterday, pivotal for my mental health, And then I was like, holy shit, maybe the purpose of my desire for my business was to just guide me away from having the same experience that I did the first time around. Like, and if that was the purpose, my business is an absolute success. Like, I'm done. Actually, I can walk out of this. Like, it has been a successful business for me. And it's just because we make up these stories in our head of the purpose of the desire and the results that we think we should achieve, and we give ourselves these like time frames, and we tell ourselves how it should feel, And so in that moment, when I went through this big kind of process, I came out the other side being so grateful for my business and for what it had led me through. Like, so much like belief in myself, belief in the work that I do, appreciation for my life and my path, like so many things, right? And so I'm inviting you to consider right now, consider that the confidence that you are desiring is going to come about through the vehicle of this desire, through following through with this desire. Let the desire of sharing your ebook be the pathway to you creating the confidence that you desire. It is the opportunity right there. Like, it is the vehicle for what you want. And this is what I mean. Like, it's quite meta, right? So, all right, let me just have a look here at just what you've said again, and I'll just make sure I've sort of covered what you've spoken to. Yeah, I think just the last piece I want to add here, like, is that like we go first, we lead first, because what it sounds like in here and what I can so relate to is this experience of like, oh, I want someone to give me the external validation to say that this is good. You have permission to go forth and share this with the world, right? And chances are, like, even if someone did that, you'd still probably be questioning yourself, and our brain does this. I spoke to this this week already. Our brain does this. It's like, why are you putting out this book in the world? That's completely unfamiliar territory to our beautiful brain and our bodies. It's unfamiliar. It's uncomfortable. Like, you're safe here, our beautiful, like, primitive part of our brain isn't designed to thrive. It's designed to survive, right? And so it's like, you're surviving perfectly. Don't change anything up. Yeah. And so our body feels uncomfortable feelings, and our brain will offer us all of these thoughts. Like, and this is what you're talking about when you're questioning yourself. You were saying things like, I have this block when I finish something. I kind of feel deflated and start to question, is this actually good? Yeah, you're questioning, like, is this actually good? Would people be interested in it? And these are the thoughts that your brain is offering you. And so you then get to go first. And what I mean by that is you get to choose, like, well, I don't know, but I think it's good, and I'm going to share it with the world. I'm going to honor my desire, and I'm going to follow through with this. And what that does, interesting enough, along the way, is it creates confidence, because you're finishing the thing that you said you would. You're creating the thing that you wanted to. You're putting it out there. right? And that builds confidence. And you can build up confidence like this in any part of your life, right? It doesn't have to be like the thing that you're sharing with the world. You know, it's like, oh, I said I was going to wash my clothes today. Okay, so I'm doing it. You know, I'm building that confidence that what I want and what I say I'm going to do, I do it. You know, I can trust myself. And so this is where it comes from. Like, this is the part where you don't need to, where I'm inviting you to go first, to build that confidence through this opportunity, to trust yourself by following through with the thing that you want to follow through with. And I'm just going to touch on where you said, I have this block. And I don't like to use the word, like the term blocks, and I do know exactly what you mean. But what I would invite you to consider is that, like, what if there was no block? You know, we can be so committed to having certain blocks, or believing that things are like part of our identity or not, that like these things are inchangeable, or there's some kind of a problem, like a block that we actually have to get rid of. Like, what if you didn't if that wasn't such a block? Would it mean that you would give yourself the permission to complete this and get it out into the world? Yeah. Or what if you just wanted to prove your block wrong? Sometimes I like to do that. Like, pleasure-driven prosperity sometimes is about like daring yourself to do the thing that you don't believe you can do and proving yourself wrong. Like, that feels fun. That feels kind of cheeky. So I would consider, like, what if there was no block? And then that's a bit more uncomfortable, because it's like, well, if there was no block, then then why have I been doing this for so long? Why have I been like not putting something out there when I finished it, you know? I'm not asking that question for you to have that kind of a feeling. Like, if it doesn't feel helpful to ask yourself that question, but let's look at it from a more helpful side. Like, oh, if I didn't have that block, what would I do? I would be putting the thing out there anyway. Yeah. And another thing that you spoke to was, you said, I have this block when I finish something, I feel deflated. And then you start to question, is this actually any good? I would suggest that things actually happen the other way around. I would suggest that you feel vulnerable putting it out there, and your brain starts offering you thoughts of like, well, it starts questioning you, like, is this any good? And when you're then now believing to listen to and choose those thoughts that your brain is offering you, that's when you start to feel deflated. You know, if you had thoughts like, someone's going to love this, and I'm so proud of myself, and I can do this, and I've got this, I doubt you'd feel the deflation. And chances are, like, feeling deflated is probably a level of like vulnerability as well. And that's okay. So I hope I have covered that for you here. Do let me know if there's anything else you want to speak to. I think I might wrap us up there. Let me just check if there's anything else you've written. Oh, and okay, you've done a really great job here where you've said like, hey, actually my writing is really good and of value. So you obviously, like with the Storybone situation, like there's a good chance you've told yourself somewhere along the line that like, oh, maybe you weren't getting as much engagement, and you're like, oh, people don't want to read this anymore, and and then we start to believe those stories, and then we go back and we're like, you were like, oh, my writing's actually really good. And isn't it interesting that you're now like relaunching Storybones because you're having these thoughts of like, actually, I write really well, you know? I think this is a great thing to do because we're thinking that. You know, so to wrap up, my love, I would say, remind you that the desire is the dangling carrot to walk your path of purpose. Yeah. So the ebook, you might have certain ideas of what the purpose of that desire is, but I would invite you just to do it and be open to noticing what actually is cultivated and created along the way. And I don't doubt that confidence and trust in yourself and your abilities is going to be part of that. Do keep me in the loop with how it goes. I want to see your ebook. I'll be excited to see your ebook out into the world. All right, my love. So I'm going to wrap it up from there. I have a little bit of time left. No one else is jumping on live, and I don't have anything else to speak to as yet. Apologies if anyone sent through anything in the time that I've been on. Actually, maybe I'll just check my phone because I know there was someone who wanted to speak to something. They must have gotten held up, and that's okay. No, I think we're good. All right. So that wraps up our 3 days of trainings for pleasure-driven prosperity. I swear I know what this is. Okay, so that wraps us up. Now, if you have any questions about mentoring with me, do let me know. I'm going to share with you my 2 offerings again. So if you do want to continue to watch on for this, you're most welcome to, obviously. So the 2 offerings are: option 1 is 6 months mentoring with me. We meet each week for a one-on-one call, whether that's on the phone or face-to-face in Zoom. And we also have a 6-month open container 24/7 of Voxer coaching. So I'm in there 5 days a week. So out of that 7 days a week, you have 5 days a week. Out of that time, out of that whole 6 months, every single Monday to Friday, we can be coaching together, plus the hour that we have together, the 50 minutes we have together each week. That is 6K. That's 5K for 6 months. Mind you, this is going to be increasing in price next year. So if you know that you do want to work with me, let me know. There's 2 spots left for that option. Now, for anyone who signs up by December the 1st, you also then get 3 weeks of free bonus Voxer coaching with me. So we'll start that for the rest of December, from the 1st until the 22nd of December. Then we have a little holiday Christmas break. And then we start our mentoring 6 months in January. So that 3 weeks is designed for you to be so clear on what it is that you want to create, and for you to have that strategy around, okay, where are we beginning? A little bit like what I was speaking to Alison about earlier, looking at all the moving pieces, what we're going to be focusing on, how we can maybe restructure things to be more soothing to our nervous system, be more pleasurable for us, and actually create the results that we want. So you've got that 3 weeks where we're going to be doing a lot of the planning for next year, so that you are good to go next year. It's not like, oh, we're going to start in February and we're like, oh, we're going to spend a month like working out what we're doing. No, we're going to make sure that by the time you start 2024, you are so sure of yourself, you are so grounded in what you're doing, you've laid all the foundations, and you are good to go. So you get that 3 weeks bonus Voxer coaching, and you also get to join the rest of my one-on-one clients for our Project Pleasurepreneur 24 session together, where I'm going to be speaking to some behind the scenes stuff that I've not really ever spoken to, like in here or out on the interwebs, around like some behind the scenes stuff for me this year, for what has really worked for me, perhaps what hasn't as well. And then I'm going to be speaking to things like what I'm focusing on next year, some of my strategies that I'm putting into place, people who I'm planning on working with, that kind of a thing. So yeah, they're the 2 bonuses if you join by the 1st of December. That's for that option 1. Option 2, it's like the let's fucking go light version. Okay. And so this is for someone who I would say you've already, perhaps you're working full-time, part-time or full-time. Maybe you're also mum lifing it and you've got lots happening, but you really want to grow your business or grow your creative project. And so what we can look to, it might also be that like you also just want to enjoy motherhood more, experience more pleasure in your life and in relationship, but you've got a really full plate already. So that is for you. If you know that like weekly, you're not going to be able to so much show up for weekly one-on-ones or like action the things that we're going to be exploring in weekly one-on-ones. You won't be able to do that each week. So we have a monthly one-on-one call together. So that's a 60-minute one-on-one call. And then you also have the 6 months Voxer coaching. Okay. Again, you also have the option to sign up by December 1 and you get 3 weeks of Voxer coaching. We are planning, we are strategizing, we're laying the foundations for 2024, and you can come to the Project Pleasurepreneur 24 workshop with me as well, with my private clients. So then you're basically covered from the start of December until almost the end of July. So that's August, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. Yeah, until like mid-July. So you're covered for about 8 months. You also get to lock in my 2023 prices. So that's what I was going to say. Option 2 for the 6 months monthly one-on-one coaching, it's $555 per month, or you can make it a payment or a pay in full for $3,300. Okay, either option is available. What else do I want to share with you? I think that's pretty much it. I think I've sort of shared both options. I've shared the bonuses. And I would just say, like, if you're curious, like, oh, I really want to enjoy motherhood more, or look, I want to talk about like this idea I have, like growing this little business from this seed, or a project that I've got, like which option's better for me, or like what would I get the most results out of, like let me know. We can have a conversation. You're also invited to have a consult with me. So that is a 60-minute free call where we get really clear on what it is you do desire, what you don't desire, what is in alignment for you, and if I can help you in terms of like mentoring, like what that would look like together. And some people just like to do a one-on-one like consult call with me to spend an hour together. We'll have a coffee, we'll relax. You'll tell me about, like, I like to hear all about what it is that you're desiring to create and what results it is that you want to achieve. And then from there, like we get the whole purpose of that is for me to support you to make a decision that you are so happy with. And that doesn't necessarily mean a decision to work with me. Maybe by the end of that call, you're like, oh, actually, you know what? I'm not ready right now, or like fill in the blank. I don't know. Maybe you realize that like, actually, no, I'm like really good with a no. I thought I needed X, Y, and Z, but now I'm noticing that I don't. Okay. Like I just want to make sure that you are satisfied with your decision at the end so that you don't go, oh, I'll go and think about it. And then we end up thinking about the same thoughts round and round in circles. We don't actually get anywhere. Yeah. So if you want to make 2024, by the way, 24 is my favorite number. If you want to make 2024 the year where shit grows fast for you, where we have that exponential growth, where we kick that little, now this is what I talked about yesterday, where we have that little kick up, like come and talk to me. The biggest growth I've had this year, I attribute to working with people one-on-one, because I'm not immune to those thoughts that pop into my head. And some of them I don't even think like, oh, is that a belief that I can change? Some of them I'm like, oh, but that's just truth, right? And then I'll talk to my coach or my mentor and they're like, huh. And they'll ask questions. And like, this is what I do. It's like, it's helping me find that optimal angle for you. Having you realize like, oh, I've already got what I want. How can I supercharge that? I've already got a strategy that I use to create this result. How can I like scale that? I already have parts of what I need. I'm just going to amplify it, right? We look at the results that you want to create, and chances are most of the time we create them a whole lot faster than what you expect. Every time I meet with a new client, one of the first questions we explore is like, number one, what you're celebrating. Like, and most of the time it's like we're celebrating that this person has given themselves the permission to feel worthy enough for support and investing in themselves for 6 months and their business, if they're in business. And the other part we look at are like, what are the top 3 results you want to create? And most of the time it's so interesting because it's like, oh, they felt like it was this big, huge thing. And within a month, it's like, oh, okay, that's just who I am now. Or that's just what I do now, So anyway, all right, I'm going to leave it there. If you do want a consult call, for those of you who are in pleasure-driven prosperity, and for those who are asking for a consult call in November, which is just the rest of this week, I'm offering 3 days of Voxer coaching. So if you book a consult call by the 1st of December, you will also get 3 days of Voxer coaching with me, whether we sign up together or not. Yep, you've got option 1, option 2, you've got the 2 bonuses. You also have the option of having a consult call with me. If you book that by December 1, you get 3 days of Voxer coaching with me, whether you sign up or not. And yeah, send me a message if you want a consult call or if you want to talk more about those options. All right. And if you have listened to this, but you know that mentoring is not for you right now, then I'm just going to say thank you so much for being here. And I trust your timing and I honor your timing and what it is that you desire. And I'm going to leave it there. So bye for now, everyone. The Voxer group is still open until the end of Friday. So we've got a whole nother like 60 hours or so in there. I'm going to be speaking to money and selling as service in there. So yeah, if you're not already in there and you would like to be, if you can't find the link or anything, let me know. I will hook you up. All right. I'll chat with you guys in Voxer. Bye for now.